Chris, and I wanted to welcome you to another edition of Around the Net with our Advanced Instructional Strategies MOOC on Coursera. Today I'm excited about a couple things. I'm excited about the topic. I think helping at-risk students is something that we need to pay significant attention to, and I think it's especially difficult in an online environment. And it's something that I have very, very little experience with in terms of a totally 100% virtual class, having at-risk students in a class. So I brought in some experts who have a lot of experience in this area, and I'm excited to have them with us. Just a few housekeeping things before we get started. We do have the question and answer app open, and we'll take a look at the questions at the end, assuming it doesn't crash. Last time we had a good chance of success on that, so I think that we'll be able to do that. But if that should go down, or in addition to that, I'll also be checking Twitter, so you can use the hashtag AISMOOC, or you can tweet any of us. We'll put on a lower third when we're talking, and at least you can tweet me, and I'll relay those questions to our guests. So just in order that I see them, I'll go ahead and give them a brief introduction, and then I'll have them talk a little bit more about themselves and their role with at-risk students. So we have Chris Bell. Chris and I know each other. Chris is Education Technology Coordinator a couple miles down the road in Saddleback, and he's also the Chief Operating Officer for EdTech Team. And then we have Kona Jones, who's the Director of Online Learning for Richland Community College in Decatur, Illinois, and Rachel Thompson, who's a English teacher at Minnesota Virtual in Minnesota, St. Paul, Minnesota, if I have that right. So I'm glad you guys all are able to join us. Thank you for taking time out of your day and your afternoon, some of you your evening, to be part of this. Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience with? Well, first let's talk about if I were to say, hey, what's an at-risk student? What do you say? And then if you could tell us a little bit about your experience working with at-risk students.
Okay. I'd say an at-risk student is any student who's currently failing or predicted to fail in the current traditional system. And it can come from all walks of life. I've seen lots of students who, high income but low engagement, and they're struggling, disinterested. So it could be a variety of factors, whether it's second language acquisition issues, it could be poverty. Sometimes it's combined in that fact. Kids who just stop going to school for a variety of reasons, bullying and whatnot. It kind of compounds as it goes. As these kids fail, it's become a self-fulfilling prophecy, and that they start to disengage completely from school. They see it not being worth their time, and sometimes in alternative education programs, they end up being, that's like the last lifeline. So with that, my experience working with at-risk students, I was working for a charter school with at-risk students from about 2007 to 2012. And specifically the students we were working with, a lot of it was their last opportunity to kind of re-engage and either make up credits or potentially even accelerate some of their credits towards graduation. Specifically, we worked in a blended and an online format, depending on the student and kind of where they were at and what their needs were. So some students were much more ready for a fully online format with a little bit of coaching, where others really needed that face time in order to have someone kind of overseeing them and helping make sure that they were going to be successful. So with that, I taught online classes, taught face-to-face classes in that capacity. Had a lot of fun. I'll pass it over to our next participant.
Okay. Let's actually skip over to Rachel, because I have Kona going to give us a little bit more extended answer and introduction. So, Rachel, what about you? What's your experience with at-risk? When I say at-risk, what comes to mind? How would you describe that to people? And then what's your experience with working with at-risk students?
Sure. Well, I would say at first, at-risk is a very hard term to define. I would say any student who faces some sort of significant challenge, whether that be poverty, second language issues, as was stated before, being a teen parent, having been out of school for quite a bit of time, and the list can go on and on and on. I've been a high school teacher for 13 years now, 5 years in traditional classroom settings, and then the rest in a completely online setting. And the school I'm at now, Minnesota Virtual High School in St. Paul, we serve primarily at-risk students, actually. Of about 650 students, half of our students would be considered seniors, most of them super seniors, many of them getting close to aging out of school at 21. So we're dealing a lot with credit recovery type situations, working students who need to have a full-time job to support themselves, parents. So we see a pretty wide gamut of at-risk students in the online setting here.
So percentage-wise, what would you say your student population is, and if you had to put a number on it or a guess on it?
For at-risk students, I would say probably close to 50% of our students would be considered that, just because we have so many who are credit deficient or have some other significant situation going on in their home.
Okay. Thank you. And then Kona, what's your role in where you're at? I think Kona can give us like a bird's eye view, because she's like at the admin, and then she can work all the way down to the classroom. So I think that's a unique perspective. And then it's interesting that you're at a community college, and what struck me most when I saw your presentations and heard you talk is that a community college cares so much about at-risk students. So tell us a little bit more.
Thank you. Well, my name is Kona Jones. I'm Director of Online Learning at Richland Community College. I've been here almost 6 years. And for me, at-risk students are what we consider to be at-risk, is any student who has a risk, which I hate to use that word risk, but a risk of either withdrawing or failing from their course. That's a really, really broad, huge definition that I think encompasses a lot of what the previous two speakers really said. It could be for any reason. It could be for financial reasons. It could be for personal reasons. It could be work reasons. It could be academic reasons. The list could go on. I mean, literally, we could spend the next hour just talking about how you would define or all the different potential risk factors. And I honestly don't know if it matters as much what the risk factor is, at least for me, as much as identifying which students are at risk and trying to get them whatever help they need to be successful.
Okay. And with that, would you mind kind of starting you have a couple slides that I asked you to prepare that I've seen before, so I wanted to have you go through those. So I'm gonna switch over to those, and then if you just tell me like when you want those to change, I'll change them for you, and give us the highlights here.
All right, go ahead. That was just me in front of, in Illinois, we have a huge Superman sculpture in Metropolis. So Metropolis is a real place, and so that's just kind of me showing that I'm trying to do my superhero best to rescue and save everyone. So kind of a theme of the conference that we went to for Canvas and Structure, and so it was just kind of funny, and I liked it, so I left it. But you can go ahead and forward.
Oh, I got to get over to a different window. Hold on.
That's fine.
Okay.
All right. Now this slide I think is really great because it really does show you that 41% of academic leaders reported retention was a greater problem for online courses compared to face-to-face or other modalities. And this is really interesting because you look at the change from 2004 to 2009, not really much of a change. Then you go to 2009 to 2013, and that's a huge increase. And so I just found it really interesting that as a whole it seems like academic leaders are realizing that there's potential differences between face-to-face and online. Now I have to say that if you actually look further into this study, this is Babson 2014, it wasn't that they were concerned about online not being as high of quality of the courses. They were more concerned about the type of student who took an online course, which really fits right in with that retention issue and retention in online courses. So it's not that they were concerned that maybe face-to-face is better. It was more of which students take face-to-face courses versus which ones take online, and that's where that real fear or the issue of retention was coming in. No, you go ahead forward. So the big thing is that, yeah, we can prepare students and faculty for success. I just kind of, there's a bunch of different things on that Wordle that just kind of show all the different things we can do to help prepare students to be more successful in the classroom. Move forward. But we have no control over even more factors, and this kind of goes into what we were all talking about initially, are what are some of those retention issues. Well, these are some of those retention issues that we don't have any control over. We can't prepare students for technical issues. Well, some we can, but you know, things pop up. Today, I'm using the webcam on my Surface instead of a desktop because kind of technical issue. I didn't realize my husband didn't have the webcam set up. So, you know, everyone runs into technical issues. Academic issues, personal issues, there's so many things we can't control for. And it's important that we realize we can't control for these and then try to figure out what we can do. Go ahead. So what we use at Richland is Dropout Detective, and this is actually a proactive solution. And what I love about this, and the fact that it's proactive, is that we really don't wait for students to self-identify. We don't wait until students fail. We're actually catching these students before they fail, before they withdraw. And that's really the big thing. I don't know about you guys, but for most of us, it's so hard to pick out which online students are at risk, unless you've got some kind of monitoring system where you know that some things that I'll talk about, you know, that, hey, this student has already been at risk, so I'm going to monitor them because they're already at risk. You don't really know. It's not like you're seeing them in class like you would face-to-face and can say, hey, that student's got a confused look on their face. Hey, that student, you know, hasn't been showing up. It's really hard to detect at-risk students when they're online, and Dropout Detective does a really good job of catching that before it becomes a problem. So if you move forward, what I'm going to show you are some different overviews. So as an admin, so if any of you out there are admins, this is really amazing because prior to Dropout Detective, I just kind of had to sit around and wait for faculty or students to identify who was at risk. With Dropout Detective, I can literally log in. We're using Canvas, but it's not LMS specific. But I log into my LMS, click one button, and there I have a list of every student listed from most at risk to least at risk. Now, FERPA, don't worry, these aren't real students. This is a generated report just to kind of illustrate it. But you can see the red, and then you go yellow and green. Well, every day I can log into my LMS and tell you my top at-risk students. I can then click on their name. So if you want to go ahead and see individual, and then I can see for an individual student exactly what the problem is. And this is amazing because I can tell you right now today who my top 5 at-risk students are. I know their names, I know what's going on with them, I've been in contact with their teachers, I've been in contact with their advisor. These 5 students know that Richland cares about them and that we are trying to do whatever we can to help them be successful. And it's all because I have this information right at my fingertips. Prior to Dropout Detective, like I said, we just kind of had to wait until midterms came out and then kind of go from there. Well, by that point, some students were already so far gone, you really couldn't do anything to pull them back, and some had already withdrawn, so it's a lost student. If you go ahead and move forward a little bit, you can also harness the power of your student analytics in your learning management system. So we're really lucky. We have Dropout Detective, which we love, and if anyone wants to ask me about that, you know, later, I'll be more than happy to answer that. But if you don't have Dropout Detective, there's still a lot of information from your LMS that you can use to help figure some of this stuff out. So going forward, these are some initial things. So go ahead. So some risk factors to watch out for: infrequent logins, missing assignments, and low grades. And that might sound a little silly, but in all honesty, I've taught online as well before, and I know that I didn't always pay that much attention to who was missing an assignment. Sometimes, especially if you were using auto-grade features, sometimes it was hard to catch that a student, you know, was missing something because it was, you know, Canvas was grading it for you, your LMS was grading it for you, and until maybe you got to, you know, a week or 2 in, and then you realize, oh, wait a second, you know, this student didn't turn in this big paper. And then you look back and realize, oh, heck, you know, this student hasn't turned in, you know, a number of assignments. Low grades. sometimes a student might be running that borderline, you know, of CD, and so you might not actually catch that they're doing poorly. And then infrequent logins. A lot of times, at least for me, if the student was just logging in and turning in assignments, I didn't necessarily notice that they might not have been logging in frequently. And we all know that the sign of success for online is, you know, students logging in and being engaged, you know, more than once a week. So these are just some things to watch out for. But my suggestion is, even, you know, since it's hard to maybe keep track of all of these, you know, it's low tech, but, you know, make a spreadsheet. You know, pull up a Google Doc, open up a spreadsheet, and keep track of kind of some information on your students. Moving forward, if you've got your LMS, this is an example from Canvas. You've got last activity and total activity. So this is just something on our LMS, but other LMSs have other comparable features. So this is just a quick way to see when was the last time the student logged in, and how much time are they actually spending in the LMS. Now, total activity, I kind of don't like that one just because it really is a gray area. I mean, what if they logged in and then, you know, went and watched TV while their LMS is logged in? So you got to take that one with a grain of salt. But at the same time, you know, if you see Mr. James Jones, who's only been in 37 minutes and we're at the end of the semester, well, you probably have an issue right there. So, you know, it's a grain of salt, but it might be an initial red flag to get you looking a little bit further into what's going on with the student. If you move forward, we also have in Canvas a student analytics that shows us how many page views, participations, and then assignments and current score. So this is kind of a nice overview that we're provided by Canvas that kind of just gives us a good idea of which students might be more at risk. With the assignments, you look for a student who has more red than green, and then you get to see that current score to kind of get a good idea of what's going on with the student. Another page, go ahead, is this page views, and this is nice because it lets us see for a specific student what the student's actually looking at. So if you have a student you're concerned about, you would go and check this and see that, oh, you know, this student is looking at a bunch of things, or, oh, wait a second, this student really isn't clicking on anything, they're not looking at stuff, there may be an issue. So these are just some examples of some information you can get out of your learning management system, regardless of what system you're using. Moving forward, some other issues that are risk factors, high credit load. Now, it's not always easy for faculty to get this. In fact, it might be very college dependent. I know a lot of our faculty don't have this information right at hand, but if you are a faculty member or if you are able to get this information, these are some definite risk factors. So high credit load. Obviously, the more credits students taking, the more at risk. Multiple online courses or only taking online courses. I can pretty much tell you that we've got, I want to say, 8 online students who are taking 18 credit hours, and they're all online. And those students are pretty much always listed in orange to red. They're always kind of walking that line. And it's not necessarily because they're bad students, but because when you're taking that many online classes, it gets to be kind of hectic. It gets to be kind of crazy. And those are some students that we really watch. In fact, I've got a report that I run at the beginning of the semester that lets me know pretty much all about our online students. I get a list of every class, so by student, how many classes they're taking, how many classes of those are online, and how many are regular and hybrid. And I'm able to then sort the students out by who's only taking online courses and then who's only taking online courses by then their credit hour. And I can tell you those students are some that we initially just right out of the box, you know, first week of class, we stay on top of, and they do tend to be higher risk. They do tend to kind of gravitate into some lower grades, some missing assignments. So it's really, if you're an admin and you can run a report or get some information like that, it's really useful. And if you're a faculty member, if you have access to this information for your students, it can really help you when you're working with a student. Students only taking 1 online course versus you see a student taking 4, right there you've got a good idea of what the student's up against, and it can really help you when you're working with them. Moving forward, so kind of our process is we monitor student risk factors, we communicate with the stakeholders. So I stay in communication with the faculty stay in communication with me, we stay in communication with advising, who are also kind of our counselors. And then we obviously also stay in contact with the student and let them know that, hey, we're here, we're concerned about you, what's going on. So that goes into that contact the students, documentation. I can't say enough about document. Document. If you're K through 12, you probably already do this to excess. But if you're not, sometimes you don't realize how important it is to document every communication you have with a student, every communication about a student. That makes it so much easier then to go back through and see what's going on, who's been in contact, what the student has said, just who's supposed to be in charge of something or checking up on a student. It's just really important to document things, because then you can go back and see where are you at with the situation, who was supposed to be the one doing something, and has the student followed through with what they said they were going to do. And then this also leads into referring the student to needed student support services. For us, that's really crucial. Is the issue a financial one? So do we need to direct them to financial aid? Is it academic? So we need to send them to tutoring. Is it more of a personal issue and we need to get them in touch with a counselor? Really figure out who the student needs to be talking to, and then make sure you get that student in to see the right person, whether it's online or whether the student, and we do have some students who come into campus. They're online students, but they do come to campus to talk with some of our student support services.
So
yeah.
if you don't mind, let's camp out here for a little bit, because I think this is a good place to kind of come up for air and like talk about. So in your experience, Rachel and Chris, do you when you have an at-risk student in your class, do they, the first thing Kona has on the slide is monitor and communicate. So is that communicated with you, or do you just kind of find out?
So I can jump in on that. Sorry, I jumped in. So teaching on when I'm not currently teaching online, but we didn't have Dropout Detective, and so I had to rely on several data points. One was LMS participation, so we were utilizing Angel and then Haiku. So then I would really look at that, identify what they had done previously. I could take a look at their transcripts, take a look at their completion rates. If something was online, I could indicate pretty readily for myself if a student was going to struggle, especially if I knew that they were repeating a course for whatever reason. So I'd take a look at that. So I had to look at my own data points. I would have loved something like Dropout Detective as a predictor. But yeah, a lot of it is communicating with their counselors and making sure that you're finding out what's going on. And I'm speaking specifically from K-12, so that's obviously a different conversation than at the college level. But then essentially also talking with their parents, if it's something, or parent or guardian, if it's something I think is warranted, just so I can talk about what the expectations are for the course. Even when you do face-to-face orientation, sometimes that still gets lost. So doing a follow-up communication piece, whether that's by phone or if you happen to be able to do it in person, even better. But really kind of talking through what are the points that they struggle with, what are the things that they've struggled with in the past, and how can we better support them at the outset. If you hit that out the gate, then you're better off in the long run. That also helps to establish that relationship with the student. And then potentially I can mediate and prevent them from potentially dropping out earlier. And completion rates being what they are, that's the constant challenge.
All right. So Rachel, what about your experience?
I would echo a lot of what has been said already, and again, through the K-12 lens, I think that communication is vitally important between not just the staff and the student, but the family members at home as well. Having a robust student information system as well as a robust LMS helps a lot. We're currently using a platform called MSTAR from a company called MGRM that provides a lot of analytics to teachers, so we can see how students are doing in all of their classes, amount of time online, like counts clicks and things like that, which is really helpful for teachers to monitor, at least on a weekly basis. We also leverage what we call academic coaches, but they could also be considered like homeroom teachers whose sole job is just to monitor attendance and contact students at least once a week and create like lesson schedules and things like that for them. So I think just being hyper involved is really the best first line of defense.
Yeah. Um, so you both have mentioned, everybody's mentioned communication. And then in K-12, we also have parents that we need to communicate with too. What avenues of communication do you find to be the most useful?
I'll jump in on that one. I would say definitely just direct phone calls,
Okay.
whether they are scheduled or as needed, seems to be the best way, most direct way to communicate. I really like having scheduled calls with my students where they know I'll be checking in, at this time each month. But we will do anything available to us. So we have some parents that only text or only email or only use instant messenger, so whatever works for that family, but we're just incessant. We'll hound them down.
Yeah, I'll agree with Rachel on that one, especially in my experience. Yeah, those direct phone calls to the parent or guardian are the most effective, especially if you can't see them face to face. Having that opportunity to express either concern or just let them know, hey, I just wanted to check in with you and see how your child or your student is doing, allows for me to kind of initiate that dialogue and put some pressure from the home front as well. Um, and the key is that I don't want my kids to go hiding, because once they go hiding, it's really hard to find them. They're good at it.
So, yeah, you mentioned this when we were talking about this before, Chris. Like the hardest thing about the at-risk online versus face-to-face is they hide from you. Um, so how do you get them out of hiding?
Well, I think a lot of it is your relationship with the kids. So if you build that relationship up and start that from the beginning, and a lot of what I did was a lot of traditional icebreaker, synchronous, asynchronous activities that allow them to talk about things beyond the content, to allow people to get to know them and for me to get to know them and them to get to know me as well. Started that relationship building. And sometimes, you'd be on, they'd have access to me via instant message, and the ability for them to just whenever they needed to ping me and ask a quick question or say, hey, what's going on? I'd ask them about Minecraft and things that the kids were into, just because that allowed us to kind of build that dialogue outside of what we were actually working on for school. And through that, those relationships allowed me to continue to make the hard ask when they were struggling. I'd be like, hey, you can do this. Like, don't quit on me now. You can totally do this. And that, because I had that established relationship, I more often than not could get them to do what I wanted them to do.
I would have to echo what Chris says. It's so important to have that relationship with students and for students to know that you care about them. And you would be amazed. Obviously, we can't contact parents at the college level, but just reaching out to students and letting students know that we care, we're here to help. You'd be amazed at the number of them who say, thank you for reaching out. Thank you for just checking up. And you're right, you do start to kind of develop a little bit of a relationship where they know that, hey, you care. And if they contact you, you're going to try to help. You're going to try to do whatever you can, to get them whatever they need. And that really goes a long way to kind of building that rapport and building their trust that you're there to help. So even at the college level, I think you're still able to do a lot of that. It'd be nice, though, if you could call their parents, especially the ones whose parents are paying. God, I would love to be able to do that, but you can't do that here.
It was interesting. Like I was reading our discussion. We have a discussion post on an article that INACL. I don't know how you say that. How do INACL? Am I saying that right?
Yeah, you said it right. INACL.
Okay, INACL. Sounds weird. But they put out a report on a research report, just kind of a summary of research on at-risk. And so we've been discussing that. And one of the comments that came in today was just exactly what we're talking about here. The teacher said they didn't have so much of a problem as, like, yes, it takes quite a bit of an investment to get to know these students and to get them to come out from hiding and to get them to trust you, and you've got that going. And the teacher didn't really say that the problem is with the student per se, but the system overall and the way it's designed, well, the teacher invests all this time and effort in getting to know the student, and then by the time they're really going, the class is over, and then what happens? They go to a different student, and the student's taken from them, and that student starts at square one again. So just thinking if we had a better way to somehow organize things so that maybe that teacher now is the academic coach for the student as they go into the next class or something like that. Do you guys have any programs or any ideas around that?
That's an issue that we face at the school I'm working at now. To better meet the needs of our at-risk students, we actually changed our entire scheduling system. So instead of students taking 6 classes for a semester, our students take 3 classes for a quarter. So they're doing 3 semester-long classes in a quarter, in 9 to 10 weeks. So our turnover rate with who our students are is very fast. So building those relationships quickly, you have to really hit the ground running. That's where having an academic coach really helps, because our students stick with that one person all year. So at the bare minimum, they formed a relationship with that one person. And then we also work cross-curricularly with the other teachers to at least have a point of contact. So if Johnny has a relationship with the biology teacher, to start with, I might communicate through him or get introduced through him, and just using everyone on staff has been really helpful.
So that goes into what Kona was saying about documentation and documenting all your communication and interactions. How do you do that, Rachel?
We have a communication log where we will log all online, phone, face-to-face interactions. Currently, we don't have one built into our LMS, so we're simply using a Google form, and then all teachers have access to the spreadsheet to view that. And then we also save all emails and all instant messages. So we do have a long record that we can keep just to refer back to ourselves, and then also for any sort of other kind of reporting legalities that we may need. Okay.
And then I noticed also, like after that, your last thing that you had in your document, your steps there, Kona, was refer. At a community college level, like you're an at-risk student and a teacher, is it teacher referral, or is it something that you identify, or all of the above, and what services above and beyond like what a normal student would have is there available?
It normally goes through the faculty member. I'm in communication with the faculty member, but normally it's the faculty member just because they're in the trenches literally. I might be able to see kind of globally that this seems to be an issue, but then I kind of work with the instructor to let them know what I'm seeing, and then really let the teacher decide what they feel would be most appropriate. And normally we can work together to kind of help figure out what the best thing for the student. We also work with our counselors. We also have an early alert specialist that in the past has been able to help us kind of figure out the best place to put the student, so to speak, in what they need. We don't have anything other than this one person who also helps kind of moderate what's going on. We don't have any specific special services. It's just services that we would offer to any student who might want it. It's more of, a lot of times at-risk students don't realize all of the different services that are available to them. They might be a student who has had some financial hardship, and they don't realize that we've got grants and we've got scholarships that are literally just for students who have, their house burns down and all of their books went with it. We've got grants and scholarships for these special circumstances. Well, a lot of students don't realize those types of things. Some students don't realize that we have counselors just to talk about personal issues, that it's free. Your parent died, your kid died. We've had all sorts of, spousal abuse, any issue you can think of personal, we've had it. And we have counselors who will initially talk to you, and then we can also refer you out. We've got a service that provides free counseling for our students that we can refer them to. So for me, it's really not that it's special, but that many students just don't realize all of the services we have and don't take advantage of it. And for us, it's just getting the student to the right person. It's making sure they know and have that direct link. A lot of times, even if they know, they don't make that little bit of effort. But if we say, hey, here's the person, here's the phone number, or here's the email address, they're expecting you, here, do it. It's a lot easier than that cold call or the, oh, well, we've got this service, so here you go take care of it. So it's that personal touch, I think, that really helps our at-risk students.
Okay. I think we have a question that fits in pretty well here from the question app I'm kind of looking at. It's pretty funny. Hi, I'm at risk, but I'm on. This is a first for me. How do you structure online mentoring for at-risk learners?
I'm not sure what they mean by structuring, but what we try to do is just the biggest thing is communication. I've heard of a couple colleges who literally have student mentors that are built into the course, and they've had a lot of success with that. It's normally a student who has been very successful in the course and has recently taken it, and so that student is kind of a almost like a teaching assistant, but they don't grade. They just are kind of there for support. They're there for maybe answering little questions that you don't feel comfortable asking the teacher, but you'd like to know. And I've heard a lot of really big, lot of success with that type of mentoring. For us, I don't know if we necessarily consider it mentoring as much as just providing support across all the different levels. And the biggest thing there is just that communication piece, that we really do try to communicate with a student via email, via phone, via whatever method seems to be able to be the best thing to get in touch with a student. I don't know if some of the other areas.
Yeah. And Chris, I think you put it in our planning document. You put a really, I thought, a really insightful question. I think this is from you. Mm-hmm. You can disclaim it if it's not. How can we better include input from at-risk students in program development and implementation?
Yeah, the reason I thought about that is more often than not, we're not including the kids as we develop programs to meet their needs. And more often than not, we know exactly what is good for them, and especially I'm speaking at the K-12 level. But what I found that when we sit down with those students and really kind of pick their brain about what kind of program they think would work for them, I think they really value having that opportunity to give feedback. And sometimes it's not anything outside the box or anything unexpected, but it allows them to validate some of their feelings and about the experience that they're going through. A lot of these kids are non-traditional. They do not mesh well with the traditional school structure. They have different needs, maybe learning needs, and maybe for a variety of factors. But seeking their input, I have found to be really effective, and it often brings interesting and new surprises, like students who want to work with teachers to develop Minecraft curriculum and things like that.
Mm. Yeah. We have a question about Dropout Detective. So they were wondering, like, is it separate software from your LMS, and what is the cost involved? Which I don't know if you can speak to that or not, but.
Dropout Detective is not learning management system specific. So it does plug in beautifully. It's a LTI plugin to Canvas, so it does plug in beautifully to Canvas. But I know that it works in a number of other learning management systems, and they are ever expanding their learning management system base. So it is not learning management system specific. It is an outside third party that has lots of different customers. In regards to price, I think per contract I can't say specifically how much I pay, but I can tell you that we are a very poor community college. My budget, I lost, I think it was 20% of my budget 3 years ago, and I never got it back. So I've been flatlined. So not only did I lose 20%, but then I've been flatlined ever since. And as you probably guessed, things have gotten more expensive. So I've been doing as much as I can with a lot less money. And still, we are able to. We've been using Dropout Detective. We're just starting our second year of Dropout Detective. So even though, like I said, we are an extraordinarily limited resource community college, we are able to afford it. So it is very cost effective. Without putting into exact numbers, it's very cost effective. And when I show, I've got some results. When I show how much we are able to increase our retention and success, it's really, we see it as an investment in not only reaching out to our at-risk students, but reaching out to them and getting them to stay and not withdraw and be successful. So it's kind of...
I think you had a slide on like your data that you've been collecting.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I'm back over there. Can everybody see that?
Not yet.
Hold on a second. Ah.
There we go. Okay, so what are the results? Go ahead.
Okay.
Go forward. So student risk level. If you remember, I had the red, yellow, green. Red are the high risk. And so looking at all of our online students, 18% fell into high risk at some point. So that doesn't mean that they were always high risk. It just means that at some point during the semester they were listed as high risk. So then I took that 18% and moving forward.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. This is the outcome for just that 18% of high-risk students. So out of the 18% that were at some point high risk, we did have 35%, I'm sorry, who did pass their courses. We had 27% that failed. I can tell you that out of the 27% that failed, every single one of those 34 was still listed as high risk at the end of the semester. We had 38 who dropped, which is 31%, and then the mixed comes in when you have students who are in multiple online courses, and maybe they passed one, failed another, passed one, withdrew from another, that type of thing, or failed and withdrew. And there were just so many different combinations depending on the number of courses that we just grouped them together, called them mixed. So as you can see, our students who were listed at high risk, yes, we had a third that passed, but you've got even more who dropped or failed. So definitely Dropout Detective is doing a good job of picking out those students who are having some big issues. So moving forward, another kind of interesting thing is students who dropped spent an average of 2.8 weeks listed as high risk, and this was just kind of cool because when we started monitoring, and we monitor, not only every day, but we kind of look at the history of the student too, of how they've been doing overall. And so when we start seeing 2 weeks of high risk, that's when we know we're getting closer to a potential of dropping. But moving over to how this actually translated at the end of the semester, from fall 2013 to spring 2014, we went from an 81.3% retention to an 84.3%. Our previous 2-year average was 79.5%. So what's really huge is that previous 2-year average was prior to Dropout Detective. Fall 2013 was our first semester using Dropout Detective, so we didn't have a full percentage point increase, but we were trying to get, or I'm sorry, we had a full, it was not quite 2% increase. But then if you looked at previous 2-year to our spring 2014, which is where I would say we fully kind of got into the mode of really how to use Dropout Detective in the data, we raised it almost 5%. So a 5% increase in retention in less than a year, and the only thing we really changed was just getting Dropout Detective and using that data to really contact and work with the students. But so you say, okay, that's retention. So great, you kept them in the classroom. What we really care about, right, is whether they were successful. So if you go to the next slide, we've got success. And now look at this. From fall 2013, we had 72% success. We bumped that up to 77% success, which we thought was huge in a semester. And that 72% was about average. I did look at the previous 2 years, and we kind of bounced around between 70 and 73, depending. So getting up to 77% success, which is A, B, or C in their classes, really was huge for us. The really cool thing, too, is that where that big increase came in, we did have a slight increase in the number, or a decrease in the number of Fs, but the big decrease or issue was that withdrawals was really big in fall 2013, and that number of withdrawals really lowered in spring 2014. So basically we're taking students who were previously withdrawing and bumping them over into that success category. And for me, that's the huge thing, is when you can take students who would have withdrawn and not pass their class, not even pass, but just not even finish the course, and move them over into a success category, that's huge for us. Moving forward, I think we're just about done with this. So my big thing is we can't save everyone. We would love to save everyone. We can't. Go ahead and go forward. But we can retain and make a difference with some of them. So that's kind of my song and dance for student retention and what we're trying to do.
That's neat. I like the sheep on top of the giraffe there. That's cute.
Yeah. Everyone needs a little help, right?
We have another question about Dropout Detective. The Dropout Detective. It's LTI compatible, and so the question was, does it work with Blackboard?
I'm pretty sure. I'm not up on all of their different partners just because obviously they work with Canvas and that's what I use. But I think they are Blackboard compatible. If they don't plug in directly to your learning management system, they also have like an outside web page that you log into, basically their site, and you can get their data. So for me, I log into Canvas and get it. But I know for some people, they log into the Dropout Detective web page and they get their data. So if it doesn't integrate directly into your learning management system, a lot of times you can still get it. It's just on their web page instead of in your learning management system, which isn't quite as convenient, but you still get it. The Dropout Detective, I'm not sure of the exact link, but their company is called Aspire, ASPIREDU. So it sounds weird because they're missing that extra E, but it's Aspire EDU is their company name, and they're great people to work with. So.
Okay. So yeah, check on their website. Teresa asks, was there a study on the reason for withdrawing?
We do collect that data. Unfortunately, we let students, it's kind of like an open-ended blank for them to add in, and many of them just say, because I needed to, or that type of thing. So we really haven't collected a lot of quality reasons of why students dropped. But in a lot of cases, when we were able to get some information from students, it had to do with personal reasons or the academic of, I just don't feel like I can be successful in this course. Like I feel overwhelmed. I feel like I just can't be successful. But in a the largest thing is normally they just list it as a personal reason.
Right.
And that's big.
Okay. I'm not sure I understand this question, but I'll throw it out there. What's the next step for failing students?
The next step. You know what? Unfortunately, we can't save everyone. And this is going to sound potentially really bad, but I've actually been reading a really interesting book, Academically Adrift. I don't know if any of you have heard of this, Academically Adrift. And it talks about kind of, we have a big, huge grade inflation that if you look at over the last, I want to say 20, 30 years, the number of A's, B's, C's has increased dramatically over what it used to be. And so for me, I know we're kind of off topic here. I think of a bell curve is how grades should normally look, and some students fail. Now, granted, that might not be a good thing for K through 12, but at least for higher ed. And when I was teaching, I kind of expected a couple students would fail no matter what I did. And that might sound awful. So, I mean, I think we're trying to do the best we can for the students we can save, but I think there's a certain population that it just doesn't really matter what you do. There's just too many things going against the student at the time. So I guess I'm not completely against Fs. That might sound bad, because I guess I'd rather the student get whatever they earn versus try to maybe inflate it to get them up into the next category.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, like, yeah, there's statistics, and just because a kid fails, I mean, doesn't mean that they're not going to be successful for the rest of their life.
Oh yeah.
There's that too. What do you guys, Chris and Rachel? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's a really good point. I think like there are periods of time when kids are struggling emotionally, or they're struggling with increased workload at home, job loss at home, things like that can sometimes be temporary, or a temporary situation. And sometimes they just need to get their groove back, and ultimately they can be successful. And I've seen it time and again. That with the right support, both at home and also in school and online, then they're able to be successful. Not every kid, unfortunately.
Right. And I would agree with all of that too. I think, especially with at-risk students, at a certain point our hands are tied. Like, we can offer academic success courses and intervention plans, but if they don't engage, at a certain point well, sometimes we do go to their house for home checks, but we can't go to their house and make them engage in school. But we can recognize that online isn't right for every student, and we often have conversations about how students may be more successful in another environment and suggest other local schools to the family for them to explore, and work sometimes are a bridge between that school counselor and our school counselor to help with a smoother transition for students so they don't get behind and get off track for graduation.
I think that's a really important point. Online is not for everyone. Obviously, I'm the director of online learning, and I love online learning, but online is not for every student, and I don't think it's for every faculty, and that's a great point.
Yeah. And then I think we'll take one more here. How do you deal with students who are failing that have learning differences? Do you focus on what their needs are?
Can you restate that?
Yeah, how do you deal with students who are failing that have learning differences? Do you focus on what their needs are?
We do. We have a full special education team and 504 coordinator and social worker. So certainly if it is documented in an IEP or 504, we make those accommodations and modifications. But we individualize for every student. That's what's great about online, is that we can work with students one-on-one, whether it's in tutoring or tweaking an assignment here or there. So as much as possible, we focus on the students' learning style, their strength, and how can we maintain rigor but level the playing field for each kid.
I'll agree with Rachel on that. And so the environment that I was in as well, we really did a lot of coordination between the special education department and the counselors that work directly with the students and families. That information, having that 504 information or having that IEP information is so essential in helping me strategize some of the things I needed to do to help that student be successful. Whether it was making sure that that I captioned every video, which at the time, we didn't have to, but I made sure that I had a student who had hearing issues, so I made sure that I spent the time to caption videos. Really going through those things that you need to do to make sure that they're successful.
I would mirror that similar, even though we might be talking about different age ranges. Even in community college, we do have an accommodations or disability services that we work closely with. Normally, we try to do this before the semester starts, so that way, if we do have special needs, if we need captioning, if we need anything that the student might need because of a disability, we will make that accommodation and we will do our best to work with them. If anything, I find our students with accommodations tend to, when they get into the online environment, do better. That might sound funny. I mean, it kind of depends on their accommodation, but because they're already working with that we have some lead people in our accommodation. So since they're already working with people, they normally are used to being in contact with those people and staying on top of things. And a lot of times, by the time they get to college, they're better at asking for help than some of our other students. So even if it's a learning disability, a lot of times they're more comfortable with saying, hey, I need tutoring, and being upfront. So they might be our at-risk students, but sometimes there are better at-risk students because they've kind of already learned how to be their own self-advocate by the time they get to college. So we're kind of lucky. Thank you, K-12, for helping us out with that one.
All right. Well, I think that wraps up all our questions, and I know we're coming up on an hour now. So I just wanted to thank you guys all again for joining us. I think it's a really productive conversation, enlightening. I learned some new things just by hanging out with you guys, and I'm sure all our participants in our MOOC that are all the way around the world. So we have people from Beijing to Chile to everywhere. So some of them will wake up tomorrow and they'll watch this, and I think they'll really appreciate it. So thank you everybody for joining us, and it was a pleasure.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks a lot. It was fun.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and end the broadcast.
Thanks, Chris.